Hi guys, I'm Emily from wavyhaircare.com and this is Wavy Hair Care, my YouTube channel. This is part 2 of a little series on gel casts and wavy hair. Last week I covered the basics of what a gel cast is and problems related to getting a cast that is too hard or that is difficult to scrunch out. In this video I'm going to cover why maybe you've never got a gel cast and what can cause you to struggle with getting a cast, and also some other kind of like random tidbits about troubleshooting problems related to hair casts. Another problem related to gel casts that I wanted to cover was, what if you get a ton of frizz when you scrunch out the crunch? So I'm a little bit of a rebel, I think, for just using my hands. It seems like most people do use a little bit of an oil or a little bit of a leave-in, or they wet their hands, or a lot of people will use a silk or satin scarf, or even just like a cotton t-shirt, anything to put a barrier between their hands and their hair when they're scrunching, because they find that using their hands just introduces a lot of frizz. And I certainly introduce some frizz when I scrunch out my hair. I feel like literally any time you touch your hair, you're gonna introduce some frizz, but mine's not enough to where it feels like I need to do the extra step of scrunching my hair out any other way. But again, everybody's hair is different, and some people's hair will just like really frizz up, or some people are just really wanting to absolutely minimize frizz as much as possible. It's just their styling preference. And so if that's you, I would recommend scrunching out the crunch with an oil or a leave-in and using a silk or satin scarf. You can even use like a silk or satin bonnet, basically anything that's like silk or satin, as a barrier between you and your hands, or as a barrier between your hair and your hands, not as a barrier between you and your hands. If you don't have anything silk or satin, then like a cotton t-shirt, anything that is like as smooth as possible. Basically, you don't want to use like a traditional bath towel, because there's the texture there will introduce more frizz. But yeah, so those are some ways to reduce the amount of frizz that you're introducing as you're scrunching out your crunch. Trying to be really gentle when you're scrunching can also make somewhat of a difference. I occasionally see videos online where people are like just really going really fast when scrunching out your hair. And kind of the faster or rougher that you are with your hair, I think the more likely it's going to introduce more friction, which is going to result in frizz. So you could just very gently squish, and that's going to introduce a little bit less frizz than being a little bit more haphazard about it. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who have never been able to get a gel cast. And this was me early on, and I actually thought I was getting a cast, but I really wasn't, until for me it was after I got a haircut that I was like, oh, this is what a cast actually is, because I had less hair and I was able to actually get a gel cast for the first time. And then I suddenly realized that what I thought was a cast wasn't a cast at all, or at least very little. So the number one cause of not getting a cast, especially if you have never ever got a cast, is just not using enough gel or mousse. One of the wild things about learning the details of how much hair really can vary that has always stood out to me was the difference in hair density. I believe I read somewhere that it can vary by up to 6 times. So somebody with very low hair density can have just 1/6 of the amount of hair that somebody with really high density hair has. I'll try to cite that if I can find that. But even if it's just like 1 in 4, let's say I was misremembering, right? It still makes a lot of sense that if one person can literally have 4 times as many hair follicles as somebody with low density hair, then that person who has a lot of hair follicles would need to use approximately 4 times as much product to get the same amount of coverage as the person with low density hair. And that's also not even factoring in length. So if somebody has really dense hair and it's really long, then they're going to have to use even more product than that lower density person with shorter hair. And so logically that makes sense to me. And yet at the same time, it can feel really strange to watch somebody else's routine and see that they're using a third of the amount of product as you, or 3 times more than you, depending on where you're at in the spectrum. But it's definitely a real thing that the amount of hair that you have and the amount of product that you need to get good coverage can really vary depending on your hair type. And so if you're somebody who has really dense hair and you've never got a gel cast, it probably is because you're not using enough, and that's probably because you're seeing how much product other people use and are using a similar amount, which is completely logical. But it still just doesn't work out to be as much as you need sometimes. And so that's kind of the pitfall that I fell into when I was new to all this. My hair was down almost to my bottom of my, or top of my jeans. So my hair was incredibly long and I have really dense hair. And stylists had always said to me, like, you have enough hair for 3 people. And I never realized that that isn't entirely a joke, that you literally can have 3 times more hair than other people. And if you do, you're gonna have to use 3 times more gel than other people. So if you are somebody who has thick hair and you've never got a gel cast, or if you've got a tiny bit of stiffness here and a tiny bit of stiffness there, then you might even completely double the amount of gel that you've tried using before and see where that gets you. You might need to even more than double it depending on how much hair you have, how dense it is, and how much product you were trying to use before. But in general, if you aren't getting stiffness all over, that's kind of my number one guess, is that you need to use more gel. There are some other causes though. One thing to check is try Googling the specific gel that you're using and see if other people get a cast with it. If you're trying to use a product that has light hold gel, some of them just won't create a cast on anybody, and there are some products that will create a cast on some hair types and not on other hair types, which is kind of weird. But if you're looking for a gel that should definitely give you a cast, I would recommend LA Looks gel in the Sports or the Mega Spikes. That's the blue or the yellow versions. I think honestly any LA Looks gel, but definitely those 2 colors I've used a million times and can definitely vouch for. They're a true hard hold gel. They definitely should give you a cast if you're using enough, and they're only like $2 or $3. So I often recommend to people, if they're trying to experiment with just getting their first good gel cast, go buy LA Looks, because you'll get a ton of it. You can experiment with it and figure out exactly how much gel you're gonna need to get a cast without wasting a whole bunch of money. In the last year or so, I've seen more people talking about how they've never got a cast and they're trying to do the bowl method. And the bowl method works really well for some people, but it does really add a lot of water into your routine, and especially if you are doing the bowl method by adding gel and then re-wetting your hair with that water, that can cause some of the gel to drip back out. And so I think I wouldn't really recommend trying the bowl method to people who are new to trying to figure out how to get a cast, because I definitely think that it's harder to get a cast when you're using the bowl method. But if you really do want to stick with the bowl method, then you probably just need to use more gel than what you would do if you weren't using the bowl method, because it does introduce more water, does dilute it a little bit. Some of it drips back out. So the bowl method could be messing with you a little bit. Another fairly common thing that I hear is, I can't figure out why I've never got a cast, and I always style my hair at night and then I go to bed. And then I ask some more questions and find out that they're laying on their hair before it's dry. So you absolutely can style your hair at night, but it has to be really dry before you go to bed. Because your hair, as I said earlier, when you add gel, it kind of tries to capture that shape. But if your hair doesn't dry with gel in that exact shape, if you lay on it, then it's going to end up capturing that like smushed shape that your hair might have when you're laying on it at night. So you really need your hair to be dry before you go to bed. So that means if you're going to style at night, style early enough that it has time to air dry, or use a diffuser and make sure your hair is dry before you lay down at night. In some cases, people struggle to get a cast, and it's because of their leave-in conditioner or curl cream. So leave-in conditioners and curl creams even if they're defining or curl enhancing or things like that, the primary purpose of those products is to moisturize your hair. They might have a little bit of hold, but primarily they're there to keep your hair well conditioned between washes. And so they really soften the hair. And some leave-in conditioners and curl creams, when mixed with either all gels or with certain gels, they just don't like play nice. So sometimes if you use the wrong leave-in or the wrong curl cream with the wrong gel, it won't let that gel make a curl cast. It will kind of interact with the gel in a way that disrupts the cast. So if you've never got a cast and you're using a leave-in and a curl cream, maybe try a wash day where you skip the leave-in, you skip the curl cream, just use a gel and see if you can get a cast that way. And if you do, then you might need to switch to a different leave-in conditioner or a different curl cream, or you might need to use less of your leave-in conditioner or curl cream. The last idea that I have for why you might not be getting a cast, or why you've never got a cast, is if you touch your hair too much as it dries. Every once in a while I come across stories where people hear about scrunching your hair to encourage waves, and then they think that that means you scrunch your hair the whole time it dries, or you scrunch it a few times an hour until it dries. And if you're regularly touching your hair after you've applied your gel, that can disrupt your cast from forming. You really want to get your gel in your hair, and you can like scrunch your hair like immediately after you apply your gel to help it kind of curl back up. But once you kind of get it in the shape you want to touch it as little as possible, which can be really hard with air drying. And with diffusing, you can pixie diffuse. It's going to touch it a little bit. Not saying to be like terrified of any touching, but you want to keep it really minimal. You don't want to be scrunching or like really playing with it a lot, because if you do touch it too much or too roughly, it definitely can disrupt that cast from forming by the time that your hair is dry. And sometimes that can also make hair sticky. If you have gel in your hair and you touch it too much, for whatever reason, the gel will just stay sticky if you've touched it too much. So try to not touch your hair as it dries. If you used to get a gel cast and now you can't, and you haven't changed products, then I have a couple of ideas for what could be causing that. One would be that your hair has gotten longer, and so now you may need to use more than you used to use. Sounds kind of silly, like of course you need more product as your hair gets longer, but because hair grows so slowly, I've had this happen to me where I've had a few weeks where it's like, why can I not get a cast? And then I realized like I've been using the same amount of gel for 9 months and my hair has kind of grown a lot in that amount of time. And so it could just be that it's time to increase your gel a little bit if your hair's grown out a little bit. And then second would be moisture overload. So in the same way that protein overload can cause too hard of a cast, if you get moisture overload, that can make it really hard to even get a cast. So if you haven't done protein treatments and you don't use much protein in your routine, that can push you into moisture overload, and that will make getting a cast harder. I have a video that went over my favorite protein products that you can check out if you think you need to add some protein into your routine. When I was new to embracing my waves, I really was convinced that there was something just different about the hair in the back of my head that made it like impossible to get a gel cast, because I had never ever got a cast there, and I was getting a cast on the sides, and so I thought there has to be something weird about the hair in the back of my head. And which seems so funny to me now, because what it was I just wasn't getting enough gel back there. And I have another video that goes over that, how to get a cast in the back of your head. If you have dense hair, especially if you're styling upside down, it can be really easy to kind of accidentally overlook how much hair you have in the back and how to get hair into like that thickest part of your head. But I guess kind of the overall point I'm trying to make is, if you find that you get a cast in most places but not in others, then whatever area doesn't have gel, whatever area doesn't have a cast, you didn't get enough gel there. And so you want to find some way in the application process to try to get more gel to whatever area it is that you're missing. And a cool trick is the smasters technique. So this is done like halfway through the styling process. So if you have your hair about halfway diffused, you can really lightly use your fingers to kind of feel all over your hair. And if you feel that there are spots that just feel too soft where you can tell a cast isn't forming the way that it should, you can dampen that area, or at least I like to, and then add more gel just to that specific area that isn't getting a cast, and then it can still save that part of your hair and help you get a cast all over. So that can be a really good trick to use when you're new, is to just stop diffusing about halfway through, make sure you've got a cast everywhere, and add more product to any areas that might need it. The final question that I wanted to answer related to hair and casts was, can you get a cast from products that aren't gel? And you can, at least some people can with some products. I get a light to medium cast with most mousses that I've tried. A lot of times I can get a cast from a hair custard. I don't really like custards. They tend to be light hold and kind of heavy, but I can usually get a cast with them. I can get a cast with hairspray. So it just kind of depends. But some people can even get a really light cast with some curl cream. Some curl creams have a very light amount of hold and can give a cast. So it does vary. I just tend to say gel cast because mousse cast or whatever sounds silly to me. But with some products, yeah, you can get a cast with other types of styling products. Okay, I think that sums it up for all of the things that I had to say about getting a gel cast and troubleshooting some of those common troubles that people have with getting a cast or getting too hard of a cast. If you have a question that I haven't answered related to getting a gel cast, getting rid of a gel cast, anything related to casts, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to answer. See you guys next time.